He has.
Important meeting as we discuss and get closer to our goal of establishing the funding levels for and the definitions of our categorical elements. We'll also have a summary of the recent meeting of the subcommittee, the transit subcommittee. So thanks everyone for being here. Let's get kicked off with our meeting summary from our last meeting, which was February 21st. Do I hear a motion for approval of the meeting summary?
So moved. I'll second it.
Dale. All right, any comments, concerns, or corrections?
I'm just going to put on record again that I would prefer more detailed meeting minutes, so I'm going to abstain again.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstains?
I'm abstaining. I don't know what you're supposed to say then.
I abstain. Can we get the abstentions on the record?
Yes, I got you, Rachel. All right, thank you. Motion passes. We'll move on now to the third item on our agenda, which is a report from any submitted public comments.
Mr. Chair, we did not receive any public comments as of the deadline.
Very good. If comments are received after the deadline, they will be posted as usual on our website. All right, item number 4 is an update on where we are as a committee on RTA Next Development.
Good morning, everyone, and happy March. This will be a quick RTA Next Development update. I just want to highlight a few things. So again, we're going by the RTA's board's directive. In terms of the name project list, I just wanted to let you all know that the TMC is meeting this Wednesday, the 8th, to review the project list. They're also going to be looking at sources of funding, non-RTA funding, so that will be part of the discussion. And then hopefully have a recommendation back to your request to get some technical feedback from them. A separate cost estimating process will be done as well, and that will be updated as the adjustments are needed to the list are being finalized. So keep in mind that you may see the costs fluctuate here and there, and that's because they're still being adjusted. Couple of items, a couple of the jurisdictions, ADOT, for example, has identified allocation of transportation funding, for example, for State Route 210 within ADOT's right-of-way. And those are on ADOT's proposed RTA Next project list. The county also came back with some impact fees for a number of the proposed RTA Next projects. So that's something that the TMC will be looking at on Wednesday. In your packet, you received a sample ballot, and that sample ballot is going to be used as a framework to start drafting the plan. So you'll be seeing that a lot more, and we'll actually, it's filled out now, and it shows, if you look at it, some non-RTA contributions. The way that the sample ballot is shown now, it shows, here's a small example, but you have a bigger example in your packet. It lists the named projects that will eventually be on the ballot. It lists the non-RTA funding contributions, and then it lists the categoricals and the amounts. So just to give you an idea of how the plan's starting to form. And then the board is scheduled to tentatively meet later this month and hopefully review the following CAC recommended items. So the roadway element, which is the named project list, hopefully it'll be refined to $1.1 billion. The transit element, and I'll be giving you a quick transit update shortly, but looking at those allocations, which is $510 million, the safety and environmental and economic vitality elements that you'll be discussing today for 170 and 110 respectively. So that's the RTA next update. I just wanted to let you know where we are in the process. Any questions?
Bruce.
Mr. Chairman. Hockey, the additional dollars that are being identified by the jurisdictions, as in the case of FEMA County and impact fees, will that then be subtracted from a total amount? So we would reduce the project cost for us down to that amount?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Yeah, the total project cost will be made up of RTA contribution and local contribution. So, and we'll see that listing so that it will reduce the amount of RTA necessary by the amount committed by the jurisdiction. And also a reminder to everyone that from our experience from the last time, much of the final mix of local committed money was, being debated and modified all the way almost up to the election. So at least to the point where the ballot was finalized by the RTA board, there was, money being allocated or dedicated depending on, which jurisdiction was kind of the sponsor of a project. And so you can anticipate that there'll be tweaks to that, for quite a while, at least, for probably the next 6 months or so.
I have a follow-up question. If, like the development fees, are those development impact fees that are already in hand, or they're ones that are contemplated? For example, I was looking at Colossal Cave Road improvements. Those projects could be eligible for impact fees, which would reduce the cost. So I'm just trying to understand how that formula will work. I understand your notion about this will be adjusted down to the point where we do ballot, but I hope they would look at opportunities for the use of impact fees and other projects that we identified.
Yes, it's a good question. I don't know because I haven't seen details of at least the county's proposal, but my guess is that they're going with the in-hand money at this point. There may be an opportunity as they continue to refine these to look at anticipated or perhaps platted projects or projected new construction, and make an effort to say over 20 years there will be this amount dedicated, and or at least up to the point where we expect to build this project. Here's how much we expect to have. Those are, I think that's appropriate for the jurisdictions to look at it that way. Right. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Diane.
Mr. Chair, last time we met, I don't know if this is the right place to speak to this, but last time we met, there was a discussion about breaking out the environmental and the economic vitality as two actual separate things. So of that 110 million, which one's for which?
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that when we get into item number 6. Yeah. All right, let's go on to item number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just a quick update on the CAC Transit Element Subcommittee. The subcommittee met on February 28th. And just as a reminder, there are 9 members, 9 CAC members on the Transit Element Subcommittee. And we also have invited all of the regional transit working group members from around the region. The last meeting was very well attended and there was some really good discussions. One of the things we did is we took the long range regional transit plan, and I hope you all received the link and have had an opportunity to start looking at that. This long range regional transit plan has what's called service strategies. And what we did is we pulled those service strategies to help relate them to the transit sub elements. And that was really helpful for the group to review and discuss. There are 4 service strategies in the long range transit plan. the consistent service 7 days a week, which relates to the weekend sub-element. The service strategy number 2 to improve evening service, which is the evening sub-element. Service strategy number 3, expand the frequent transit network, which is part of the frequency sub-element for the current transit sub-elements. And then service strategy number 4, the targeted expansions in the suburbs, which are the remaining sub-elements. We reviewed those at length, and the group discussed, how they related to the sub-elements. We then had the group once again look at their adopted allocations that they had back in 2020, the original CAC sub-element group, which was a 10% toward weekend service, 15% towards weekday evening, 5% towards express, 15% towards neighborhood circulator, 17% to frequency, 7% for area expansion, and of course, 31% for the special needs category. After that, the members discussed some more, lots of questions were asked, and the subcommittee members requested that the transit working group members provide additional information on some costs. So we have, so for this reason, no action was taken by the subcommittee, and there's nothing to move forward to the full committee at this time. However, we did reach out to the RTA transit working group members and asked them if they could please provide us that information. We provided them a deadline of March 15th. And so hopefully after that, we can turn the information around and have it to you for the next meeting. Any questions?
Yeah.
Was there, one of the things we discussed, and it was so helpful to have the transit working group members there, I'm really glad we did, was that SunTrend wasn't expecting to have results from their COA until June. I don't know how we're going to rectify that with the March 15th deadline. So I do want everybody to be aware that SunTrend is doing a comprehensive operations analysis. And I think we're all really interested in seeing what they've got. So I don't know how March 15th is going to get us there. That's it.
Just
10 days.
a reminder that they did indicate, though, that they will have and will present to the subcommittee their public outreach results before that. So within the next month, we'll be able to at least see that part of their development process for this COA.
Right, but their recommendations is what will be there in June. So step by step, hopefully. We'll get there. That's before July. June is.
Just barely.
Thank you.
One other quick item I wanted to add to this transit subcommittee. The subcommittee at the next meeting is expecting to start the conversation about a couple of high capacity transit projects which were forwarded essentially to the subcommittee by this group, by the full CAC. So although we haven't seen that yet, the committee will be discussing it. Additionally, we understand that there may be some input from the city regarding the desires of their electeds with regard to expansion of the streetcar. Although that doesn't appear on our project list at this time, at least we have an idea that there may be some conversation about it. All right. Did I see a hand up?
Yes.
Still?
Yes.
Oh, Rachel, I'm sorry. My
Thank
screen
you.
just shows a hand.
Thank you. Yes. I just wanted to reemphasize that we really do need that information from SunTran in order to go forward. And so I'm concerned that, I mean, sure, their results of their public outreach will be useful, but we've got to have that information from the COA. And so I just want to kind of support my fellow CAC members here and saying, yeah, we've got to have that before we can work this all out. So yeah, I just wanted to express my support for waiting to get that crucial information.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just, one more thing? I would like to encourage people who aren't on the subcommittee to listen in on the meetings or attend, because I think it was really helpful to have Suntran, and then we had somebody from, who was Marana, for the transportation there too. It was very helpful. So I don't remember when the next meeting is, and I'm on the committee, but everybody should attend.
It hasn't been finalized yet.
Okay, that's
Bruce.
why I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've not been able to listen in on a committee meeting so far, but I'm wondering if there has been a discussion about the premise or the paradigm we're using with respect to transit. And reading the long-term plan this past weekend, it seems to me that the plan is primarily focused on the assertion that we're providing an alternative to people who have limited access to an auto or transportation of that kind, and expanding service where it doesn't exist. But I didn't really pick up so much on the notion that could we use transit, incentivize the use of transit to get people out of their cars and to look at an alternative form. And as an example, the things that are listed there, I didn't see, for instance, park and ride lots and those kinds of things that other communities have used. So I guess I'm just raising the question at some point whether it makes sense to have that discussion and talk about the paradigm or the premise we're using for transit. It may well lead us to the fact that there's not enough money, and that's again part of our recommendation about whether it should be a half cent or a full cent tax. But I'd like to see that be part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's good. I think so far it's just been an indirect connection that's being made that if you build it, they will come. Essentially, if there's more frequent and wider availability, that it will incentivize people. It'll bring people to transit who have not done so before, either because of frequency or evening hours or geographic coverage, whatever it might be.
And my observation has been, my daughter lives in Phoenix, about 3 blocks from the light rail, that has fundamentally changed how a lot of people, particularly middle and upper class users, get to work, whereas before they would have only chosen a car. So I just think that's an important part of the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the committee has already asked specifically if there is at least anecdotal data, if you will, about the premise of building it and how effective that is in garnering new riders. And although it doesn't seem that there's any really high level studies that can be applied necessarily, because every community is different and its conditions are different. It is something the committee is looking at understanding better. Yeah, Edmund.
Have we asked Suntran to expedite the report and finish in May or April?
We've explained to them what our committee deadlines are, and that we do need that information. So
Haven't budged. They haven't offered
so far,
yet.
They're moving at the speed of government.
they're still on their original schedule. Mel.
Thank you. Further to Bruce's point, for park and ride, I don't know that RTA has done anything to coordinate with the planning world, such as we're planning for a lot of people in Vail to live, and a lot of people live in Oro Valley. A lot of people work at Raytheon and the university. What surveys have been done to understand where people are going to be living and how we can get transit get up to work? You are totally correct that the high-level surveys won't help us, but we are a unique condition, a unique environment in some respects. We have a metro and an urban, but are there other places, and what other alternatives have been tried? What have failed and what have succeeded? And so the idea that we're putting together a plan with no information from the city, no information from RTA, no coordination, really suggests that the allocations that are in that circle that we saw should not be taken as fixed. And we're not doing the job that the community expects to make sure we have something that makes sense for the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Go ahead, Carolyn. Did you?
Unless somebody else was ahead of me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Back to Bruce's point, these sub-elements I thought were the same sub-elements that we dealt with in 2006, but there was a park and ride line item in 2006. So I'm wondering why it's not in here.
Mr. Chair, my understanding is a subcommittee requests that it be removed.
2 years ago, you mean?
Yeah, 2 years ago when you did the allocation, the approval, it was no longer.
Well, I don't remember it being on the list in the first place that we removed it, but maybe I'm forgetting it wrong. Is what was the information given to us that they've already been built and we weren't going to need new ones? Or
I would need to go back.
I'll have to
Yeah.
go back and look too. I don't recall.
Okay, I have Dale and then Rachel again.
I'll second what Carolyn said about the park and ride. I'm not sure, I don't remember. It's been long enough that it may have been done. I think the park and ride, I know there's been a lot of development in parking ride, particularly on the east side. But whether it's enough is another question. The park and rides have always been a questionable thing. For instance, and I don't want to imply that this relates to our system particularly, but for instance, in the BART system in San Francisco, they are actually building apartment complexes on a number of their park and ride lots to put more people directly close to their stations. So, I guess there's many different approaches to this. And that's my point is, I think it needs more discussion and some input from, I'd like to see some input from Suntran on that part. The other thing is I would like to see a request, not just to speed up the document, but maybe a possibility that we could be disclosed to the committee the draft version of their comprehensive plan. I'm sure the draft version is probably going to be available if they're going to finalize it by June 30th, that it's going to be available by the 31st of May or so. I think that that's another area we could potentially get some of that information and look at. And the comprehensive analysis, just to be clear, is typically an analysis of the operation of the system currently, which is, I think, critical information for us to look at. It does not necessarily answer all of our questions about what are we going to do going forward.
Yeah, good points. Okay. Oh, Rachel, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to sort of second what Bruce and Mel have said. I think particularly the notion that transit could be to incentivize people to get out of their cars is a really, really important one. And that since we're looking at a 20-year plan, we shouldn't just sort of sit back on our laurels and say like, well, we hope maybe what we're doing will do that. We should actively plan for it. And that would mean taking some money out of the roadway projects and putting them in transit. And nobody seems to have suggested that yet, but I think it's going to be crucial, especially since we've seen how little money is actually in the transit bucket when we factor in how much we have to spend on even just maintaining the current level of service we have. So let's go there, folks. Let's take some money away from roadways.
And thank you for your comments. All right, let's,
Tom,
go ahead. Hang on just a second, Mel. Hockey has something and then you can step back.
I just wanted to add that one of the things that we asked the transit working group members, because we know that their COA won't be done until, later this summer. But we asked more 3 questions that we thought would help the subcommittee. So we wanted to ask them what portion of the proposed investments are they going to use to continue the current RTA funded service enhancements that have been implemented through 2026. We also asked them what portion of the proposed investments are going to be used for new or additional service enhancements. And then thirdly, we wanted to know in their opinion or view, how would those proposed level of investments in each sub element help to meet the anticipated service needs over the next 20 years. So that's how we approached it, knowing that they have other things that they're working on. And we're hoping to get that information by mid-March so that we can turn it around and have it for the next transit sub element, which hasn't been scheduled until we get that information. So that's just to clarify that we were hoping that would help.
Thanks, Bucky. Mel.
I want to emphasize my frustration. I've been asking for information of alternatives, what surveys can be done. We have a system that is now working, spending a lot of money that doesn't cost anything. And I don't know whether ridership has gone up or down.
Yeah.
And I know that certain developers have not been requested to coordinate with employers to understand what surveys are out there, to get people to understand where they're working and where they live. And so I'm just finishing on a note that I want more than what we've been given in the past, and that the circle of allocations is not to be understood as the what we're going forward with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Abby.
One of the things we discussed at subcommittee meeting was
which is why we were going to ask the transit working group. I just want to be clear, if the CAC decides that we need more money for this particular element, can we go back to the board and ask them to change their buckets? What's the process for that? You're nodding, but there's people who can't hear you.
Yeah, intentionally. Yes, we can.
Okay, so if we get all these numbers and this information, we look at it and we're like, actually, we could do amazing things if we had 1.5 times the budget, and we think that it's worth doing this, we can go back to the board and present that.
Look, our basic responsibility is to tell the board how we recommend spending the amounts within each element that they have allocated. If we feel that more is needed or less may be needed somewhere else, if we have another way of reallocating that we think would be better, we could certainly make that as a recommendation. But what we're focused on right now is seeing how to allocate the money that the board has set aside for each of these elements. In doing that, I think we will come to a conclusion of whether we feel there's enough money in each of those buckets and whether any changes should be made. So again, we're going to focus on allocating the money that the board has asked us to work with, and make any recommendations alongside that. I think Diane, you had your.
Usually people say we don't want to belabor the point, but I do want to belabor the point this
go.
time. In that I appreciate Bruce's comment and Rachel with this idea of transit. Now we understand that amount, but we have this opportunity, and this is why many of us are on this committee, to think differently and to even put transit first and then the car second. And if we can get ourselves in the community, I mean, that's the big dream, but to then not have transit be the alternative to cars, but cars be the alternative to transit. And to that point, I just want to say anecdotally, I parked at the Mercado and rode the streetcar here, so I did a park and ride.
Bruce.
Yeah, I just want to go on the record. I hear what Abby's saying about rearranging the priorities, but if I look at all the categories, they're far, far below what's needed in any case. It seems to me that after we've gone through the exercise that we've been asked to by the board, I think we need to make a statement about the level of taxation, because I don't think taking this percentage from transit, moving it to roads or vice versa, it solves the problem. The problem is we need additional resources, and this committee has the opportunity to highlight that need and how that would impact long-term development and planning and transit and transportation in this area. So I just want to be clear. I'm not particularly enthusiastic about a subtraction or movement process, but more about making a statement to the board and electorate about the need for additional resources.
Understood, and I know you're not alone, but unless we go through this process that I've described, we have no data, if you will, or at least no foundation for making such requests. And I want to make sure that we have a foundational status as a committee to make recommendations about the level of taxation, should that be necessary. If Carolyn and a couple more in the room. Okay.
Okay,
And then Jamie and then Rob.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick comment, because I've made this before here to directly answer Abby's question. Because I attended that board meeting when they came up with those percentages, and there was definitely an invitation by the board. This is a starting point, and if the CAC feels differently or wants to make adjustments, let us know. So they were very clear in that. But of course, as Tom said, we do have we have a job at hand right now, and we'll see how we can do. But it doesn't sound like there's a lot of questions about that. So I thought I'd bring that up again.
Thank you, Jamie.
So, Mr. Chair, so is the transit committee looking at other things like mass transit to the suburbs? Are we only for, I know we have to worry about the city core and that revolution, but like if you go to like Santa Fe, where they have a train system that goes from the suburbs to downtown, that really eliminates cars. And where I live, I have to take a car. So because I think there's a couple express buses in the morning and evening, that's it. So, and it, is there an opportunity to develop an effective transit system and reliable? Because I've used it in the past and it's just, things don't work, right? So, your schedule says the bus is supposed to be here at 9:08 and it's there at 9:45.
Yeah, just to frame this, the system we have now, we're calling an enhanced system. It was enhanced with RTA money. The RTA 1 funded the level of improvement in the system that gave us what we have today. So in order to keep that quote unquote enhancement, we'll need RTA next to match and exceed. And then as we have more people and a broader geography, we have more need. And if we want to try to incentivize more transit and less cars, if you will, then obviously we'll have to invest even more. So I think that's basically framing what the issue is. But as far as your specific question about either high capacity transit or feeders, all those things are built into the recommendations which we're evaluating. Yeah. So local, what do we call them? Neighborhood circulators are a part of that. In other words, to take on a fairly frequent basis people from an outlying neighborhood to the transit system, if you will, in order to be able to use the enhanced transit program is a big part of what is being requested, and it's one of the larger elements of increase. Flip back to that real quick, maybe to the big pie.
But Jamie, to answer your question, we haven't in the subcommittee yet dealt with the high capacity. issue. We're just working on what you see here, but it's in the wings.
Seems like Tucson's not New York, but we don't want to become LA. It seems that's where we are.
Or Phoenix.
That's where we've been for a lot of time.
Yeah, okay, Ron.
The 440 million that we show, I think it is, for transit include federal transit FTA money.
The 510 million is just RTA money. The actual budget,
FTA, federal transit.
no, the 510 that's shown is proposed RTA funding.
From the sales.
And the overall budget for all of the transit system is far more than that, with federal money that comes in as well as local and fare box, et cetera, et cetera.
Can I just directly answer Jamie's question?
Sure, go ahead.
So Jamie, we did actually talk about expanding service to the suburbs. I mean, that's in their long range plan. I don't know how the money's going to get there or where it's going to come from yet, but that's been discussed. And one of the things that came up over and over again when staff was telling us about the findings of the various surveys that have been done is that people want to ride. And so you have to expand buses to meet people where they are. So I hope that can be part of the plan. And I hope everybody filled out the SunTrans survey that closed on, I think, Saturday. Say what kind of needs you had. It's in the mix.
Okay, Amanda?
I just want to add, because we are saying that what we're working with right now is an enhanced transit system, but we still are not considering the fact that the pandemic has impacted service. And that's part of the reason why I was advocating why we need the data from COA, because the services aren't quite where they used to be before the pandemic. And so we're talking about wanting to add more services, but are we even doing what we were doing before? And so how can we add more if we don't have enough operators or drivers, enough buses, et cetera? Because as someone who frequently rides transit to get around, who can only get around using transit, I have seen the impact of how the transit isn't as frequent or reliable as it was before the pandemic.
Okay, good. Thanks for the input. And let's see, Rachel, you get the last word. Promise.
Well, that's very convenient because I have to leave because again, meetings in the middle of the workday and I work. But what I wanted to say was, Mr. Chair, I'm disheartened that you keep bringing us back to using the categories and the buckets that the board put forth when we have good evidence that the board expected us to come back and modify those. The RTA itself and members of the board, for example, Rex Scott, keep saying that the CAC is drafting a plan, but I don't see that at all. We're not drafting a plan at all. A plan is being showed to us and we're basically being asked for our opinions on it. And when we express opinions that say that we want to start over and we want to do the allocations completely differently, we want different buckets, etc., we're told, no, we can't do that. We have to keep going on this track that we're on right now. That doesn't sound to me like the CAC is drafting a plan. And with that, I have to get back to work. Goodbye.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to our next item number 6, review of the categorical elements. Aki, you want to
Yes.
get this started?
So thank you. So the last time we met, we went over the sub-elements of the safety element and then the environmental and economic vitality elements. As you know, these funding allocations were provided by the board. So we're having that discussion today. One of the things to remind all of us is that this advisory committee is not being asked to identify any specific projects. It's really about identifying the funding for the different sub-elements. As you know, the RTA board will make those decisions as we move through the plan. So I'm only going to touch on each of the sub-elements. What I'd like to do is go through, we added some examples. Our team put together some examples just to help you visualize what some of these sub-elements, some of the benefits to the region that have occurred, and help you to think moving forward how that could look in the next RTA. And then I'll stop at each sub-element to show you some proposed allocations that we have for you. By no means are we saying this is what it should be. We're just proposing a number for you to think about based on the information that we have. And then at the very end, I'll pull all of the sub-elements together so that you can see the big picture. And so hopefully, if you don't mind holding your questions to that point, and then you'll be able to, because a lot of these questions I think will be addressed as we move forward. Oh, so again, there are 5 sub-elements in this category: intersection safety and capacity improvements, elderly and pedestrian safety improvements. And for the purposes of this sub-element, by the way, I know there's been some discussion about the name. We're moving forward with calling it pedestrian safety improvements moving forward, and you'll all have the opportunity to discuss that. Transit corridor bus pullouts is the 3rd, at-grade railroad safety and bridge deficiencies is the 4th, and then the signal technology upgrades is the 5th. So the intersection safety and capacity improvements, as I talked about last time, this is really to improve intersections that experience significant congestion or safety issues. One of the examples that we pulled was the constructed roundabout at Camino del Sol and Continental Road in Green Valley. Another criteria for intersection safety and capacity improvement sub-element is that the candidate locations should be linked to regional corridors identified in the RTA and PAG transportation plans. And a really good example of this is the reconfiguration at Ina and Oracle Road to incorporate those indirect left turns that you all love. And then other criteria for this intersection safety and capacity improvements that I touched on last time is that these can include, these may include intersections that are not included within the roadway element. Also, the project needs and scopes and costs are defined by the jurisdictions, as we explained last time. And then the RTA board will approve which projects to fund for the life of the plan. So again, the flexibility of this categorical is really, the main purpose of looking at the buckets. And again, you're being asked today to recommend an investment level for each of the sub-elements.
Bucky, back for just a second, just to clarify the second bullet there. The RTA board will approve which projects to fund over the life plan. Just to clarify to everyone, that doesn't mean that they will be approved now and that the voters will know what those are before they vote, but rather as projects are needed, they will come up over the 20-year period. They're unnamed as of this time. Perhaps some of them will be identified that would be in the first 5-year portion of the plan, but much or most of these projects will go through the normal planning and programming process to get funded. And the board obviously is the one that makes the final authorization for the expenditure of that money through its normal funding process. Okay.
Thank you for that additional information.
Did you have a question, Jamie?
So, determine the allocation, has there been a needs analysis done by them?
Good question.
Explain that.
Hold that.
Okay.
Hold that question. No, it's an important question.
Mr. Chair,
Hello.
hi, it's Joanne Sabah.
Okay. Go ahead, Joanne.
I've got my volume on my speaker set up to 64 and I'm having trouble hearing the people that are in the room. I'm getting not every word. Could people speak up a little bit louder or suggest I get a hearing aid? I'm good with either way.
Turn it up to 100.
let's go with the simpler, add some volume to your speaking, everyone, especially in the room.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce Jamie's comment. And previously, there was $66 million allocated based on specific projects. We're now showing $70 million recommended for this category. You know, what is that based on? I could make the argument that many of these intersection projects were high priority ones and have been addressed in the first round of RTA. Couldn't we in fact see a reallocation of these numbers because the demand in other subcategories is more urgent than intersection? So I'm just wondering how we come up with a methodology for making these allocations. I understand it's an open question, but I just wanted to support Jamie's position.
Yep, it is an open question, one that we need to deal with. Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no. So as Bruce actually pointed out, the current funding allocation for this sub-element is 66 million. And again, the number in red is just a proposed 70 million allocation, and based on the information, based on the needs that may be coming up in the 20 years for intersection improvements. But by no means is this number the one that you need to agree on today. We're showing these to you as an example. And at the end, like I said, you'll see them all in front of you so that you can have that discussion. The next sub-element is the elderly and pedestrian safety improvements. And again, we're calling them pedestrian safety improvements moving forward. And you can also decide on that when we get to that point. Some examples, well, one of the criteria of the sub-element is to construct pedestrian-related improvements along major roadway corridors. So an example of this are the shoulders, the paved shoulder sidewalks and the street lighting that went on Valencia Road between Cardinal Avenue and Westover Avenue. Another criteria were the bridges, tunnels, and a variety of at-grade signalized crossings. You've all seen several hot crossings along the way. One of the examples we're using here is the one at Speedway Boulevard and Ritchie Boulevard. And then ADA access improvements include wheelchair ramps, completing small segments of missing sidewalks, and an elimination of barriers to bus stops. And there are ADA and bus accessibility improvements all throughout the region. For this sub-element, the current funding allocation is just under 14 million. And we're proposing for your review a suggested allocation of 20 million. The next sub-element are the bus pullouts. These are constructing bus pullouts along major transit corridors. These are corridors that are called high ridership corridors. And, you know, this is where the buses are known to delay the traffic on a regular basis. Some examples that we wanted to show you are, there's one at Valencia Road from Mark Road to Camino de la Tierra. They've got bus pullouts. And then along Elvernon Way, there are several of them at Fort Lowell, Glen, Pima, 22nd, 29th, and 32nd Street, just to give you an idea of what falls under this criteria for this sub-element. Now for this sub-element, the current funding allocation is 13.6 million, and we're proposing 10 million. And the reason for the decrease is, you know, due to there are 200 bus pullouts already that already have been constructed, and there may not be that many needed. So that's the reason that this value was proposed. The next sub-element is the at-grade railroad safety bridge deficiencies. And this is to provide the design and construction of the existing at-grade highway and rail intersection improvements. These are specifically for intersections that have high congestion and safety issues. So an example of this one is the La Cañada Drive and El Toro Road Railroad crossing improvement in Sahuarita. Another criteria for this sub-element is the existing roadway, pedestrian, and other transportation bridges in need of repairs or upgrades. And a really great example of this was the Elephant Head Road Bridge replacement over the Santa Cruz River. The current funding allocation for this sub-element is 6.7 million. And again, our suggested proposal is 10 million for at-grade railroad and safety and bridge deficiencies. And then finally, the signalization technology. This one is pretty critical. It has four major components to design, build, operate, and monitor traffic signal technology. And this is in association with the ITS, the Intelligent Transportation System. And these four areas include the traffic signal coordination that you see, the transportation systems communications, the traveler information that's delivered through multiple sources. And then the incident and emergency management, and we wanted to kind of highlight this one focuses on improving management of traffic incident response and recovery through plan development, regional training, regional incident management teams, expansion of regional and emergency traffic signal preemption, roadway service patrols, and expansion of the emergency link, the ER Link emergency telemedicine program. One of the great examples that we have in the region is the acquisition of the material and installation of what's called the uninterrupted power supply, UPS, light emitting diode, LED. There are about 20 or more of these systems. These systems are located at 20 or more critical intersections, and they keep the traffic signal equipment functioning when there's a power failure. As you all know, during a power outage, a lot of the traffic signals go dark. With this service, they're installed the necessary uninterruptible power supply system, and they keep the intersection functioning during a power outage. So this is just an example we wanted to use for this. Now for this sub-element, the proposed funding is only 7 million. So we're proposing up to 60 million for this because of the need, the high need for it.
Has there been any input from?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, Dale, the 60 million is just something that we're putting in there. It hasn't been presented to anyone at this formally. These are just numbers, and I'll show you why we came up with these numbers in just a second. And again, sub-elements are descriptive budget items, and you know, the RTA board is the governing body that's going to implement this. So here on this slide, you can see that the numbers in red are the proposed numbers that total up to the 170 million, which is the safety element allocation that the board has provided. On the right side is the current funding allocation that totals 107.4 million. So again, this was just a presentation to show you, give you a little bit more examples of the sub-elements under safety, give you an opportunity to pause here, have the discussion, look at the proposed amounts, which are again, completely for your discussion, and hopefully make a recommendation.
Carolyn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add a piece of information, and at our chairs meeting, we talked about this, Pocky, and staff had agreed to have a third column of what was on the ballot. And I just wanted, I've got the numbers because we were talking about the current funding allocation, but this is the allocation after 2008 happened and all the categories got slashed, I would say, except for the roadway, the corridor improvements and the business assistance. So I'm just going to go down the list while that is still up. So the current funding, it says 66,000. It was 100,000 on the ballot. A million.
And Carolyn, Mr. Chair, not to interrupt you, I do have that column. I did not have time to put it on the slide, but I do have, and I was going to review it during this phase as well. But if you have them as well, that's fine.
I do. So elderly, you have current funding on the ballot was 20. I'll just use the big, those small numbers. Transit corridor bus pullouts, current funding is 13. What was on the ballot was 30. At grade railroad, what's in current funding is 6.7, and on the ballot was 15. Signal technology, what current funding is 7, and it was 15 on the ballot. And the total in this category on these subcategories has 107, but it was 180 on the ballot. Just as information, I mean, this, what current funding was after we had to cut everything because the RTA tax revenue wasn't coming in as we expected when they did the forecast before the election. So I just want to make sure everybody understand that, but thank you.
Yeah, that is correct. And as Carolyn said, the anticipated revenues did not come in. So what we have in the column on the right are the current funding allocation based on numbers forecasted now through 2026. But yeah, the original ballot amounts or originally anticipated RTA revenue, as Carolyn mentioned, were 180 million for this particular element.
The 170 that shows here is the total of the placeholder proposals here is 170 million. So less than the last, less than RTA 1. But the 170 is the number that the board has sent forward to us. So just so that we've got everybody on the same page as we discuss this. Justine.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. I just wondered if somebody might have the information handy, like what is the percentage right now of the overall budget going towards safety? I can't remember what that looked like. So I'm curious, just given that safety is such a concern in our community, and just seeing the rate of traffic incidents and violence in our community, like just thinking that should be, and if there is flexibility with these buckets, maybe that is a consideration of the CAC. And also, I just wanted to, I thought we'd kind of, like there was some room for kind of questioning the safety sub-element of transit corridor bus pullouts, that maybe kind of arguably isn't so much a safety concern. And if there's room for continued discussion about that, that's more about congestion. And it really, if you're a transportation user, a public transportation user too, it also slows down your travel times for the buses to have those pullouts, and it doesn't really provide any additional safety, I think, is kind of what I understand. So just wondering if there's room for that, and maybe that's something that the transportation subcommittee is also talking about. Those are just my thoughts.
Quite a bit to unpack there.
Thank you.
First item, you asked what percentage safety is and or was. At 180, it was less than 10% of the original RTA 1. And based on where we will be at the end of 2026, we're forecasted to be at 107 of about 1.7 or 8 billion total collected. So doing the math in my head, which is a bad idea, it's about 6% or so.
Eek, yikes. Okay, so not an improvement over the previous incarnation from RTA 1. So, all right.
Yeah, and so this 170 is that the board has recommended is based on a $2.3 billion estimation. And admittedly, it's a more conservative estimation this time than the first one, at least we hope.
Yeah, sure.
But
and then if you were even to, again, I think it's been raised, and I think it's worth kind of belaboring the point that maybe the corridor bus pullouts are really not a safety element. And so then you remove that additional 10 million and it becomes even less, really. I mean, that's like something masquerading, congestion masquerading as transit. So something like that, or I don't know.
We will try to get some feedback from the jurisdictions about this, because for the most part, they've embraced this bus pullout process, built it into their major projects pretty much universally. Two issues perhaps for us to be aware of, at least. One is that a lot of bus pullouts were installed, and need for them maybe somewhat less now since so many of them have already been built. The other is what you bring up about whether this is a safety issue, a congestion issue, or either or neither. And I think input from the jurisdictions about that is important at this point. There are people that I've spoken to, at least transportation people, are somewhat split, but I'd say most of them believe that the pullouts are actually a safety issue, keeping buses protected, and obviously the folks who are on those buses. With the loss of some freewheeling out of the bus stop back into traffic, if there are preemptions that are being considered that would allow those buses to get out quicker, then I think most people would recognize that it would be really kind of a safety enhancement for at least that kind of a design element.
Sure, gotcha. And again, I just hope we can explore that more and maybe get some additional data, and maybe the folks who are more transit literate can add to that conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, let's keep talking about this one right now and see if there's a path forward we want to look for, such as I recommended getting some feedback from TMC jurisdictions about their commitment to bus pullouts and or their response to this kind of, I guess, dichotomy of purposes, if you will, for the pullouts. Edmund?
Your TMC comment actually feeds perfectly into mine. I find I've sat here and we've been meeting for a while here, an hour, and so many of the subjects that we discuss lack data. Like it should be somebody standing up at the thingy over there and saying, guys, transit corridor bus pullouts are in because the data shows that when buses are parked while moving traffic happens, we see X amount of accidents per year as they rear end the bus and or people get stuck at the intersection, get hit immediately. We're talking about transit. Like I want to see that, and I know this is just kind of going off a little bit, but I'd love to see some data on the demand. Is the demand as our population grows and we're so far behind on our roads? When I was in RTA 1, CAC 1, it was all about the fact that we were so far behind on our arterial roads. We're decades behind because we've turned this thing down. We voted against it numerous times. Even talking data, show me data that people are moving to this community and they're demanding the bus, right? Show me that right now, because we're all kind of just based on kind of what we think and feel, and maybe we've read some articles, et cetera. But from what I've seen, there's tons of cars. There's a lot of traffic and there's more people moving to our community. And by the way, if we want more buses, we need more roads and we need bus pullouts because we're just going to have more congestion. I'm with you. I ride my bike every single day. I was riding my bike on a city of Tucson road this morning, but I drove here. I just want to see data. We like sit here and argue for hours on stuff, but we have no data. So just post lunch chat there.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
Thank you. My God.
Diane.
This is a question I've had for a while, and it hasn't been defined for me. In here, we outline elderly and pedestrian safety improvements. By the time this goes into effect, I'll be elderly. So I'm curious what specific things are targeted at an elderly as opposed to general pedestrian.
Well, I think at our last couple of meetings, at least, and also the subcommittee meetings, we've talked about that. And I see that Paki is just showing this as plain pedestrian safety, recognizing that this brings all pedestrians, under that umbrella. And I, for one, think that's better. I'd rather not be labeled again.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
just looking at the ballot from the last time, in this the safety sub elements total was 180 million. That looks like it was 9% of the funding, because it's listed on there, but I don't know what 107, when it got cut. I don't know what the total revenue was, but on the ballot, it was 9%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't, but it went down.
Yeah, it's down. It's probably somewhere around 6% now.
Yeah, so it's by the same as what's being proposed.
Depends on inflation, depends, we've already put numbers towards those categories.
Yeah, how much has been done already that perhaps doesn't need to be done at the same high level, and does it cost twice as much now as it did back then? Yeah, Patricia, then Joanne, and I think Mel after that. So go ahead, Patricia.
Thanks. On the point about data, I definitely hear that. I think that, could help aid in some of our conversations. One data point that I'm familiar with that I think would lend something to this conversation and that I would use to argue in favor of more money for this categorical and also for removing bus pullouts from it would be that almost 100 people died on Tucson streets last year. That's a huge jump up from the 2 years previous. I think we're seeing an increase in pedestrian fatalities on Tucson streets, and a lot of it's because of engineering decisions. So I think that is a huge data point that we should be talking about if we're going to be having this discussion.
We have to look at fentanyl use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And marijuana.
Okay,
Substance.
Joanne.
I have a former client was a bus driver, and I have been told by this bus driver that they are permitted to have 3 what they refer to as bumps a year, which means people that are starting, passing them while they're trying to leave the pull out or things like that. And I don't know if any of the numbers that we're looking at, I don't think they factor into that. Those numbers aren't reported to us. Yes, they're allowed to have 3 bumps a year. I know.
Okay. Look, I don't know, is there anybody here who wants to confirm or deny that? No. Vigorous shake of the head. All right, thanks. Mel.
2 points. The history of having presented on the ballot a number that is 180 versus where we are today. And I think we need to have a presentation that we're ready with the public to have more than, we just didn't have enough money. We made a promise to perform, and we just can't let that go with a 1-sentence answer. On the allocations, I'm not understanding what we're doing if these numbers are not based on some reality. Why are we approving them, such as the 60 million or the whatever numbers? As we went through them, we were told that they're not really real numbers. So why are we doing this?
Edmund, please.
Just say Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter.
Great question, Mel. I would suggest especially with this group, anytime we have something presented to us like new numbers from safety element, the chair of that committee come and explain them to us. If not, we're going to debate them round and round because we don't have data.
Can I be added to the bottom of the queue?
No, you're at the top.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna echo what everybody said about needing more data, but I also am really frustrated about this because we've been trying to share data and studies and information with this committee. Justine, who's on the call right now, has tried to send a couple of articles around. We've never seen any of this. And so when I'm saying things like intersection improvements doesn't belong here because capacity enhancement and safety are not the same thing, they're at counter purpose, that's because I've read that. in numerous sources from transportation engineers. I'm not making it up. It's not just a feeling, although it is a feeling of utter terror when I try to cross some of these intersections, but that's borne out by data, by evidence, by these crash rates, by these 99 pedestrian fatalities we had last year. And I feel real weird voting on numeric allocations when we don't really understand why we're doing these things and we don't have the data. So I would ask for us to get, like Edmund said, some more data on these points and why we need this money. But also I want us to do more robust information sharing. I know somebody mentioned bus bulbs versus bus pullouts, and I think that this is all really cool stuff to learn, but it's also really important so we can sell this plan and understand why we're spending this money. If we don't need to spend any money on bus pullouts, that's more money we can put into something else, you know, but we need to understand this. So I'm just gonna echo everybody else.
All right, if I could suggest something, let's go through each of these individually and talk about what data we want to see. If there's data that's already been provided that we have, is there something more we want, or is there a clarification of that data so that we don't continue just to chase our tails here? Go ahead.
And I think we're going to cause us much more debate if we go through these individually. It's my opinion. I think we're all going to come up with our own opinions. What's missing in the data from whoever creates it that gives it to us on a slide so that we can see it. What's missing is the why.
Mm-hmm.
So just show me the data and tell me why you came up with the data so I can then wrap my non-transit professional mind around it and give you an opinion so you can go back to the board who makes all the real decisions.
Yeah, for example, 70 million for intersection improvements when RTA 1 was approved for 100 million. So that's, you know, a 30% reduction from what it was then. Is that a result in this just estimation? Does that sort of indicate that the board or the jurisdictions believe that there's less need now for those intersections because some have been improved, or many have been improved, or they're not going to get so much worse that they have to be completely rebuilt as they were before? I don't know.
We need the why.
I'm sorry, I can't answer those questions yet, but those are the kind of things that I agree we want to hear more about. Hang on just a second.
Wanted to address the data.
Sure. I did just want to point out there is a lot of data that has been presented to this committee in the data portal. I have it pulled up right here. Safety at intersections, roadways, and incidents that were property damage, possible injuries, incapacitating and fatalities. It's been provided to you guys. Of course, we can do more and walk through some of it and help it be more accessible to you to help you make these decisions. But yeah, as Tom mentioned, if we could talk about some of the data that you guys would feel is beneficial to make some of these decisions. If we have it, we can continue to point you guys towards it, or we can look into it and see if it's something that we can provide. Some of the information that we've heard you guys talking about is transit related, transit safety. Those kinds of questions will be really important to ask at the next transit meeting, because you'll have Suntran and representatives from the jurisdictions there that can get into that nitty gritty. What do the bus pullouts accomplish? You know, what are they trying to accomplish, and what is the actual impact of those types of things? So those specifics can be addressed at that committee. I know you mentioned the safety subcommittee. There isn't one. So this element doesn't have a subcommittee.
Who created this? Like, who came up with this budget?
The 170 came from the RTA board, and the numbers in red are just as a starting point for discussion.
And all we need to answer is why. Because if not, we're gonna all debate it and figure out our own why. So we came up with 70 million, which is different than the original dollar amount from how many years ago did the original happen? I mean, think of use those dollars from 15 years ago and now say what the dollar's worth today. And why are you choosing 70 million? They had a reason. If you literally just put a little blurb under each one, which is answering why they come up with that amount, you will save all of us from debating each other all day long.
Farhad, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, please. Good conversation. So just to provide a little bit of a context. So as you mentioned, let's use the intersection as an example. This applies to all those line items. The original amount was $100 million. We will complete $66 million of that 100 million. So by definition, there's remaining $30 million of worth of projects that we had identified throughout the current RTA plan for additional improvements. So what you see as the 70 proposed, a portion of that is already part of those projects that we want to complete. And then the balance of that, roughly 50% of it, would be to identify additional needs throughout the life of the new plan. And as I believe the chair touched on it, so by then we've already accomplished over $100 million worth of intersection improvements. So the need is going to be less over time, but we do anticipate that we're going to have more intersections that we want to touch. So combined, I think that's a better way of looking at it. Combined with the current RTA and RTA Next, it's the total of 66 plus 70 is what we're looking at as an extension of the new plan. So we hope to be able to touch as many intersections as we can, and that'll be the total of 70 plus 66. And going back to the data exists. We have the data, and as Jeanette mentioned, we'll be happy to walk you through the data. So the Technical Management Committee, that's the committee that is throughout the life of the RTA, they have been engaged, they have been involved, and those projects are identified through a process to be able to bring them forward and fund those projects. So we'll demonstrate what we have, but again, keep in mind, we don't know which intersection is going to need improvements 10 years from now because we don't have that data, but we have the data for the near term. So we can demonstrate that as an example of how those decisions are going to be made. Another point of clarification I want to make sure everybody understands. So when we talk about current RTA versus the future RTA revenue sources, the board has already set aside a portion of that for the overlap. So when you look at the entire 2.3, a portion of that is for the overlap. So that's not included in what you see as the middle column. The middle column is after the overlap projects are funded.
Okay, thank you, Farhad. See, I had Bruce and then Edmund and then Bruce, sorry.
Thank you, Farhad. Thank you. That's what we need. Because if not, we're looking at a number and everyone has an opinion on the number, but we have no basis. So thank you very much. And the only thing I would ask, which probably segues to Bruce, what he said earlier, is as you're saying, there's 30 coming from that wasn't completed in RTA 1, and we're putting in another, let's call it 35 as we forecast forward. We don't know which intersections, but what we want to know, I'm speaking collectively, what we want to know is as you forecast moving forward, is the 35 that you're putting forward till RTA 3 enough in case we need certain intersections improved? Because I'm guessing your engineers kind of have a clue on what they think might be needed to happen intersection improvement wise moving forward. To Bruce's question, maybe a half cent's not enough.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Oh, go ahead.
I think you can all answer that question. There is not enough funding. So with the current RTA, as you all know, we're doing our best to accomplish what we can with the revenue that's coming in. With the new RTA, you can propose a plan, and we know, at least based on experience, that we hope that our revenue is going to be closer to what we anticipate to come in reality. But really, the core of this question goes back to our long-range planning effort, and Jeanette can tell you about that. She went through that recently, and she's going to start that process again. As part of that process, we identified the region needs $15 billion to meet all of our needs in a 25-year horizon. So what we're doing is not meeting every single need, but meeting those priorities, meeting what we can with the new $2 billion of RTA funds. So by all means, I think you all know that we're not going to get to the point to meet all the needs. We just have to prioritize the needs that we can meet.
Thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, I just also like to echo Edmund's comments. Farhad, that was extremely helpful because it gives us an approach to how these numbers were determined. I mean, there are lots of different theories and approaches to transportation. We can find data to support any kind of approach you want. It, in part, is contextual in terms of the region. I think what would be helpful if, when we go through these subcategories, if the primary methodology that Farhad just laid out is different in how they'll suit it. It'd be helpful to know that. So for example, where there's an addition, it's because there are unmet projects that need to be handled. If there's subtractions, in other words, one is less than it was before, as in the case of, safe corridor pullouts, it'd be helpful to know that that's because a significant number of those have been taken care of. So just understanding in each of these categories what the basic approach was in putting these numbers together is very helpful.
Yeah, or just for us to put our own numbers to it.
Right.
We have to have some logic that that supports that. Okay, I have several hands up. I'll do the best I can to get them in order. Joanne?
I don't know if anybody has suggested this, but I thought I'd give everybody the opportunity to shoot it down. Why don't we just use the percentages on the current and forecasted and apply the same percentages to the proposed?
Nah, it's not factual based.
Yeah, it's not based on facts.
Yeah.
Down, Joanne.
Yeah.
Hey, it's tax season.
Couple of comments were that doesn't have any better logic certainly than kind of what we're seeing here. But it's probably a data point to check into as we go through these to say, well, okay, do we have a justification for increasing signalization from 15 to 60 million? What's the justification for that? That percentage is up, 300%. So why?
And also keep in mind it's tax season, and any shortcut and down and dirty math I can do, I will take advantage of an opportunity.
Okay, great. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't want to echo what others have said, but I frame this in a different way. All due respect to sort of what other members of the CAC have said with regard to what Farha said, but my perspective on this is it's not enough. Because to Farhad's point, this is an exercise in setting priorities. And in order to properly set priorities, we have to have what Edmund has said and others have said is in terms of better data. And what I'm looking for, and I think what we need as a committee, is the connecting the dots data. So to take the $70,000 intersection improvements as a point, all of the decisions that are made in terms of why, as in Y, Z, X, and that, et cetera. So Y, X, and Z. Why is that this is what we're going to spend the money on that is under that intersection improvements category to solve X problem. So the Y is the amount that is rolled up to equal to 70. X is the amount associated with spending on that problem, and Z is the result. What is the problem we're trying to solve with the money that we're going to spend and include in whatever category it is? If we cannot connect the amount to the problem with the desired outcome, why would we do it? Again, back to the point of Edmund saying the why. We have to be able to, this is my opinion, we have to be able to connect all of those steps in order to properly assign priority value to this money. Because if we're not doing that and we don't have that information, then we're just guessing and we're assigning an arbitrary number to a category where we know we have a problem, there's engineering solutions, but what is it that is it directed at? If it's as an overall priority, we say we want to get cars off the road. That means, and the data is there to say that internal combustion engines, everybody in cars, we're killing the planet. that's part of our priority, is we don't want to do that anymore, then we throw a ton of money into encouraging transit, getting people out of their single purpose vehicles, if that's what this committee decides. But without all of those dots, we can't make intelligent decisions. We're flailing away at the larger number.
All right, yeah, thank you, Chris. That's well put. Another column that would probably be helpful here too is a needs column. You know, what's the actual need for signalization technology that the jurisdictions see as necessary over the next 20 years? And same thing with bus pullouts as an example of one that we've been somewhat debating here. So yeah, if there were another column that showed what each of those needs were, it might make our job a little bit easier. Hang on, Edmund. I've got Patricia, and then Edmund.
Yeah. So to take a step back, I think, you know, what we're here for is to be representative of residents in our region, based on various survey, Move to Tucson, and other survey data that's been compiled. We have a pretty good idea what those are. Those are also reflected in the guidance principles that we as a committee came up with pretty recently. So I think if we're moving from a position of taking those into account and using those to prioritize these decisions, that will get us pretty far down the road. I think what we need to be doing is, just kind of looking back and seeing the hard numbers that I would like to see is kind of just percentage wise, how much we're spending on each of these elements. Right now, that's like 4%, right, on safety, even though we've heard that that's a huge priority for people. And I would argue is something to rank higher people's lives than, you know, congestion or other things like that. I also want to point out that in the past RTA, a lot of the categorical funding ended up getting swept to cover roadway project efficiency. So that's another thing to consider, and maybe pad for. And also that the RMAP projections, PAG's RMAP projections showed that by 2045, 9 out of the 13 safety measures, including pedestrian fatalities, roadway fatalities, are actually projected to get worse. So I think we have a lot of data that shows us that we need to be prioritizing safety and making these decisions based on a judgment that we are all capable of making, like with the knowledge and, you know, the wherewithal that we have. So I just want to put another plug in for safety and for trusting ourselves on making this decision that can protect people's lives.
Good, thank you. Kevin.
All right.
That's
Thanks.
good. That's really smooth.
I think this kind of goes to what you just mentioned about having another column about needs, but I think I heard Farhad say that there was a list of intersection projects that wasn't addressed in RTA 1. I don't know if there's an actual list or if he was just saying there's $35 million
worth of
projects. But if there is a list, that would be very helpful for all of these categories. You know, like the bus pullouts, we did so much with RTA 1. Is there still a huge need? So
There's a huge list.
So yeah, the list, if there is a list, that'd be great to see.
Yeah, session.
Farhad?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I want to answer that. There is a list. The list was developed after the $100 million was identified for that category. And then the next step in the process was to develop the list, and that list is included in the RTA's administrative code. And we can send you the copy of that. But so really that's the process. Once we identify what that amount is, let's say in this case, if you identify the amount was 70, then we can go to work and identify how many intersections from that candidate list can potentially be funded out of that $70 million. And then that rolls into the administrative code. So that's kind of the next step in the process. And we talked about this previously at different meetings. So there's a back and forth. So if you identify the amount, then we can come back and tell you, here's what can be done with that amount. And then you can still make adjustments as needed.
Yeah. And was that done for all of the sub elements or just the intersection improvements?
Most of the sub elements, the administrative code has a description of what's eligible and potentially based on cost estimating, potentially what we can accomplish with the amount of money that was tentatively allocated at the time. And then once it was finalized, we've over time, we've tried to define what that element can do for putting a dent in the needs. But again, I go back to Tom's question. We can provide a column for needs, and you all know it's going to be a lot more significant, and that can come out of the RMAP. So in our long range plan, we currently have a list of needs, and there's an assumption that those revenues will come from some source. So we can identify and align those as closely as possible to demonstrate that the needs are much greater than anything that we can offer at this point.
Yeah, and I think if we had done that for RTA 1, if we still had that information from what the need was back then, you'd see the deep cuts that the RTA 1 CAC had to make and the board had to make as far as how much of those of each of those priorities was able to be addressed at all, much less satisfied. So part of what we're here for is to say maybe bus pullouts aren't as important as intersection improvements, or signalization is the most important. And as those percentages of the need go up or down, they relate to the importance to us, at least, and eventually to the public of those individual sub-elements. So if signalization is maybe the most important safety element, then yeah, it ought to get the lion's share, or a big bump in the amount of money that we put toward it. Dale, and then Edmund. No, it's Edmund first. Sorry.
Okay.
You're waiting.
Sure.
No,
I'll say this and I'll be quiet the rest of the meeting.
No,
We're all old enough to remember a Disney cartoon. It was probably like in the 70s, and it was Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, and there was a P, and they were starving. And I was alive. I was definitely alive. None of the ladies were alive, but the men, we were alive in the 70s. But they were fighting over a pea, and Mickey had a knife, and there was, I think it was the Jack and the Beanstalk one, and they're all trying to cut this pea, and they're trying to split it so they can all eat, and they're starving, right? And they're all drooling over this little pea. That's us. So I'm going to just say this. I'm going to challenge all of us, because we're kind of a split room. You've got some people that want to modernize transit. We know transit's important. We know transit's important, but we also want to modernize our roads, bus pullouts, signalization, et cetera. What the grand scheme of this thing is, the RTA board has the true power. We're an opinion, right? So if we want to have an opinion and we want to stop fighting over the P in here, that's what we're doing. I think our opinion should be right now, today, should be back to the RTA board. And what the opinion should be collectively is, this isn't enough. We're splitting hairs. We're fighting over the P. The half cent's not enough. And I think we either challenge them to say it's a penny. It might be a penny and a half. It might be 2 freaking pennies. But we have to do what's right for our community. And if we do that, we empower the RTA board to go back to the public and say, we met with some of you in the RTA CAC. And what we heard from you was, it's not enough. We need 2 cents, and we need to get this over with. And then let's really truly come up with a plan, and let transit feel good about modernizing transit. Let roads feel good about modernizing roads. We're not here to just simply fight over the P. We're here to do something great. We have an opportunity to do something great if we stop freaking fighting over crumbs. So just say that.
thank you. Dale.
Couple things. One, what Kevin is saying is very true. My thought process is, we sat here and we spent months going over lists of projects that were proposals. And yes, we had inaccurate numbers, but we had numbers we were working with, and we were seeing those projects. We're looking at these and we're not seeing any projects or draft projects or concept of what the need is. And we need that need information to make good judgments. as far as what Edmund just said, I'll modify one thing, Ed. I'm not going to sit here and try to advocate that the board goes back to the legislature and tries to get 2 cents. But we need the 1 cent, which is the legislature has already approved. So, you know, whatever we settle on, we need to push that narrative. And I agree with what you're saying with my limitation on the fact that we should push it at 1 cent or something less. And but to get this process going, we need some of the information. I think you have it. We need to present it. We need to have a logical basis that we can build upon. Joanne's comment, well, this is my first non-tax season. It's the first time in the last 50 years that I wasn't preparing something like 250 tax returns.
Traitor.
Retired. That's called retired. But the bottom line is, yeah, I've used the same thing that she suggested, but I think we got to do better than that. We need to have some logical basis that we can project upon. And we need to have that there's certain projects, et cetera, that have been identified, some areas, and maybe haven't been any projects identified. We need to know that. And what projected needs are and what we know. And I don't think we can come up with a good answer here unless we see that information in front of us. And I know, and because I can very well remember getting some of it, you've presented some of that information as we went along, but we need to integrate that information in here. And I'm going to say one other thing. We've insisted on putting, and this goes way back. You two here are probably the only two that might even remember this. I didn't like the I don't like the headers on 2 of these 3 categories. I think they do nothing but create confusion about what we're accomplishing. Sit here with each of these categories and say what it is we're doing, and then we can take our own decisions about whether we think it's safety or congestion. I think bus pullouts are probably a little of both. But I think if you really want to involve the transit system, you'd like to get rid of them. I think that's the reality. And I think we've always known that. But as a practical matter, I do think we need some some projected numbers. I hate to use the word solid versus projected, but as a practical matter, I think we need to have some ideas from the RMAP and from various things as to what we think the needs are in these areas. And then we can work off of that and put our own considerations, our own biases, and our own projections of what those things need. But give us a floor, give us a starting point.
Okay, I've still got several comments, a couple in the room and a couple online, but I want to get back to what I had suggested before. Let's take 5 minutes here to go through each of these individually, and let's say what is the additional information that we want, so that the next time we meet, we have all that information provided, hopefully for the next meeting, that we can evaluate on our own and be prepared. So for intersection improvements.
So, Tom, so I really think we should, in the interest of time, we've got roughly 20 minutes left. I think for us to come back next time, we should do exactly what Chris proposed. Have somebody from staff say, we are asking for $70 million for X reason, and here's some examples. And then we're asking for $20 million for pedestrian.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm trying to get at here, Jamie.
Give us the why. Each one of these.
Agreed.
And why we want 20 versus 18 versus 15. And to do that on this next topic too, the environmental, which we're probably not going to get to today. For us, we're just firing in the dark saying, okay, 70 million.
Yeah, that's what
Which
I'm
is not
saying.
nothing, right? So
What is it we need to know about these? The why is obvious, but what's the data that backs up the why that you want to hear about? about what Kevin suggested, which is the list of intersections from the administrative code that have not or are not going to be addressed? And then do we know how many others beyond that at this point are necessary? That gives us a why for 70 million or a why for 170 million, perhaps.
But I think that's true for every one of these, like signalization, 60 million, that number came from somewhere.
Okay.
And so tell us what that is.
All right.
How they got that.
Bruce.
Yeah, I'm a support that. I think in each case, there are the number of projects that have not been completed under the first RTA and the list of projects that needed to be completed going forward. If we had those two lists and we understood what the projected cost was, we would have a basis for understanding where we ought to set this. I mean, every one of these has a set of projects that apparently that tag or the standards say need to be addressed. I don't understand why we can't get that list.
Well, they aren't all named.
But I'm sure some are named and then there's a 50%.
Yeah,
Oops.
they weren't named in the on the ballot. Farhad, could you weigh in on this,
That's
please?
not what I-
Yes,
We
please.
don't need names.
That's not what I'm saying. We when we first went through this, PAG staff took us through an assessment of the transportation system in Pima County. They listed roadways, intersections, and they gave them scores and safety assignments and so on. Somebody seems to know and understand what the condition of our transportation system is in specific areas of need. It would seem to me that first are the projects that were slated for the first go around that weren't finished, and the second are that body of projects or areas that need to be addressed. What is the magnitude of that? Would give us some understanding about how much money we should be allocating in this area. I mean, aren't
Yes.
those isn't that available to us as from
Mis-
staff?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yes, as I mentioned earlier, that will be the exercise to pull out and align with each sub-element from the long-range plan from the RMAP. So we can show that alignment, we can show the need. In some cases, they are also descriptive. In some cases, they're a list of projects. So yeah, we have all that information. We'll bring that back to you. And then again, on top of that, the RTA administrative code also has candidate projects for sub-elements, so we can cross-check between the RMAP and the RTA code and go through that exercise with almost all of these sub-elements. There might be one or two that we won't see an alignment between how the element is described versus what's in the RMAP, but we'll do our best to touch every single sub-element and bring that information back.
Okay, thanks. And that's just what we're looking for. And that's kind of staff homework and our homework to evaluate that information before our next meeting. Anything else on intersections specifically that people's looking
I
for?
have something specifically.
Thank you. Go
to
ahead.
say. I would like to actually answer Tom's question. I think that the why we need things is going to be much easier and how much it costs with railroad safety and signalization technology, where we can estimate just the amount of money it takes to do X, Y, Z, and maybe I'm selling that short. That seems to me like that should be very straightforward. With the intersection improvements and with the bus pullouts, I would like that to include more traffic engineering studies and background on that, because when we did talk about intersection improvements before, and I know we talked about adding turn lanes, there's studies that show that that makes it more dangerous for cars and for pedestrians. And so when we're talking about increasing and improving intersection safety, I want to know not only we estimate it's going to cost X amount of money to do this to this intersection, but that means adding a left turn lane. What's the real world impact on that for pedestrians or for other cars? So in those cases, I think we need more than just the technical details of how much it costs to do this to the intersection, but why are we doing this and what are the goals? Because we might end up having, somebody said this before, we might end up seeing this is good for one thing, congestion, but it doesn't belong in safety.
Got it.
So I'd like to see all of that.
Okay, thanks.
Just a little
That's
homework for
good
you
input.
guys.
Chris. Oh, yeah, Chris and then Joanne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to build on that point, which is might be a radical point, but is to completely redo the safety sub-elements, just as an example, reframing it as what's the goal? So it's meaningless. It's meaningless to us in terms of this category of, say, signalization technology. Okay, so what's the point? Reframing it to allow us to then tell the story, because there might be multiple elements of reducing the number of pedestrians killed. And then there might be many things that we can spend money on in order to accomplish that, rather than a list of improvements that is abstract. Is the sub-element is the goal. And then it can be a combination of multiple things, and we can allocate the money in a more thoughtful way that actually is directed at, this might be a mix of things, but we're trying to accomplish reducing accidents at railroad crossings. Thank you.
Okay. So do you have a suggestion about what those sub-element names would be instead of what we have here?
Sure.
But still there,
I
Chris?
absolutely do. But I'm talking, and as a committee, we should be thinking about that. And I challenge staff to be thinking about that, because that's helpful for us to tell the story of what is this money going towards? What is its goal?
Yeah, well, those are perhaps two different things. What the money's going for doesn't say what the goal of necessarily is signalization technology.
We're able to tell the story to the public if in the plan itself it says that we're spending $60 million or $100 million to do the following, and that money is going to go towards modernizing signalization technology, because if we modernize the signalization technology, it is going to accomplish X, which is directed at safer pedestrian crossings. If we want to spend X amount of money on railroad at grade sort of improvements, that is going to solve this problem, and it's going to accomplish where the goal is to spend that money to lower the incidence of train vehicle interactions. If we're going to spend this amount of money on improvements that are to intersections in the following ways, and it's a combination of all this money, the goal here is to make it safer for pedestrians at all levels, ages, abilities, etc., to cross our streets.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Joanne.
Yes, I have a point of information and I'd like reflected in the minutes. It was not a pea, it was a bean from Jack and the Beanstalk. I would prefer the minutes reflect we're trying to divide a bean, not pea.
Still a legume.
A legume would be even better. Thank you.
And the timestamp is 12:50 or 49.
I take very detailed minutes. Let's go.
12:49. Very detailed. Let's see, Kevin.
I'm not sure if we're still on intersection improvements or pedestrian safety improvements, but
I've lost control of this.
I am trying to answer your question though about data. I think it'd be very helpful to have like take a look at the last 5 years of pedestrian fatalities and see a heat map, for lack of a better word, where those are, and see, you know, there's probably areas we can focus on.
Yeah, that's a great request.
Can I
understand that? Got it. Good.
Can I throw a couple other things on
Yeah.
that same list?
Go for it.
Bicycle fatalities, motorcycle fatalities. And I know this is probably not on the height of everybody's list. My son is a motorcycle rider. He looks at our intersections and goes, holy SHIT. I'm glad I don't ride a motorcycle in Tucson.
I don't do left turns for that reason.
How bad it is
Right.
for a bicycle.
I don't do left turns on a motorcycle.
Yeah. And, you know, his philosophy of riding a motorcycle is when he approaches an intersection, he needs to be identifying every potential movement that other people are gonna be making. Now, he's an engineer, so, you know, you gotta add that. But as a practical matter, that's the way he rides a motorcycle. And he says our intersections with the size of our intersection is just scary beyond belief. This is a guy who rides a motorcycle to and from the East Bay to downtown San Francisco on a regular basis. You know, so, you know, he's been around and he's done it. So anyway, but those two requests.
Thank you. All right, anything then specifically you want to hear about regarding pedestrian safety? Kevin talked about a heat map, if you will, for us to see where the accidents or where the, at least the fatalities, would be good to just see all of the accidents that are reported. And, you know, perhaps where and why those are occurring would be helpful as well.
This is to pedestrian safety as well.
Pedestrian, yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
No, I have
Go ahead.
stuff for that.
Something else I'd like to know with the pedestrian safety improvements is, so we talk about tunnels and bridges, and those are things that penalize pedestrians. They may provide safer routes, but they're deeply unpleasant to use. So when we're talking about that, I'd like to see what the proposed projects are. Are we putting in shade structures? Are we making pedestrians walk twice as far to get over something? Are we putting in wheelchair accessible ramps to make people go over a highway, which is an enormous pain? What are we actually doing? And that goes back to what Chris said earlier about, you know, this is all connected. Even though this is a safety element, we do want to be encouraging pedestrianism. We want people to see our businesses. We want people to see our landscape. We do want people out of cars where feasible. We recognize that it's 120 degrees in the summer here. What are we doing so that it's not just you won't die when you're crossing the street, but it's actually a pleasant alternative?
Okay. All right, anything else you want to see on the signalization? I frankly want to hear more about where that money would be spent. And I think a big part of this is likely to be that our current signal system is way behind the times, and eventually, or certainly within the time period of RTA next, will have to be completely replaced with a much higher cost and much higher technical efficiency, if you will. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to remind people that the safety was a pretty high priority in our guiding principles and goals. So, you know, that's all I want to say. We haven't talked about those in a while, but safety continues to show up throughout that, as well as reducing crashes and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, great point. Kevin?
I think in our goals, we had something in there about future technology that is unknown at this point. I'm wondering if that's where we dumped a lot of that money, under signalization technology.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's another element for future proofing.
Yeah, I would imagine, maybe Farhad can tell us for sure, but it is kind of what we talked about. We said that we
in other words, we may not know
expected that was going to be an area of, you know, emphasis for new technologies. Farhad?
Yeah, that was the thought process. As you recall, we talked about making sure that we have a bucket to accommodate for advanced technology, and most of that would apply to improving the signal technology, the communications aspect of signals. Currently, I can tell you this: we looked at the numbers recently, as Tom mentioned. The system is outdated. For us to upgrade the entire system, you're looking more in the range of $500 million. So that when we talk about needs, those are the kind of things we'll bring back and show you that just to upgrade the existing system, that's almost $500 million. So the 60 million that's being proposed is to retrofit some of the items that we believe we can touch. So that's, and again, just to put it in context, it doesn't mean that we can't address other needs with other funding sources. It just means that the RTA portion of enhancing those needs at $60 million, we're still working towards identifying other funding sources to address other needs. So federal funds, state, local funds, they're still at play as part of the RMAP document.
Okay, thank you. Bruce.
Yeah, I just, speaking to Chris's previous comments on this signalization, I do think it is relevant to safety. And as examples of that, better movement of emergency vehicles, the ability to take advantage of new collision avoidance technology, all that requires an upgraded infrastructure. So this is a relevant topic under safety in my mind.
Yep, I would agree with that. Okay.
I wasn't disputing that,
that,
by the way. I'm not, Mr. Chair, I wasn't disputing that. That anyone who read that from my comments is not getting my point.
No,
I wasn't suggesting that.
He wasn't. I didn't hear that from Bruce's comment. Okay, thanks everyone for that input. And we will definitely try to get all that information out to you as soon as we can, and anticipate having some experts with us next time so that we can go back and forth with them about this and try to pin down what these needs are, and perhaps what our own view of the priority of satisfying some of those needs might be. Paki, could we go through the next section on the environmental and economic vitality? One thing we had talked about was whether we would be pulling those apart or suggesting that we pulled apart. Is that something that you'll have in here?
Well, I was just going to do the same thing, just talk about there's 3 sub-elements under this category, this sub-element. Greenways, pathways, bikeways, and sidewalks is one. Kind of talked about the description. We had some examples to show you where the locations are. And by the way, we try to show these examples throughout this presentation to, to help build on what we gave you before from the administrative code. We've been giving you a lot of information on all these elements and sub-elements, but and then some shared use path example and bike boulevards. Again, same thing here. There was a 29.6 million current funded allocation for greenways, pathways, bikeways, and sidewalks. And based on the information that Farhad tried to explain earlier, we're just proposing a suggested 70 million for this. Then for the second sub-element of environmental and economic vitality sub-element is the transportation related critical wildlife linkages. Description again that we just wanted to highlight. Examples on State Route 77, we had an overpass and underpass fencing project. And then also on State Route 86, we had the Kick Peak underpass on the left side and the Santa Rosa underpass on the right side. There was a 25 million allocation for this, and our proposed was 30 million. And then finally, the small business assistance. We wanted to just, highlight based on the conversation last time that the program does not include direct payments to businesses for any right-of-way acquisition or relocation of affected businesses. It's a separate function, so we just want to make sure you are all clear about that. It's separate based on the lead agencies and not from this budget, so that's really important. And again, we have many examples of the assistance that this sub-element includes. There's customer resource management, consulting hours allocation, over 1,600 custom use design construction business access maps, frames, signs, banners, complementary direct business assistance from independent contractor consultants. The consulting team has private sector consultants who represent 120 years of construction mitigation experience, as well as 250 years of business consulting knowledge. And then over 15,000 customized consulting deliverables were provided under this sub-element. The business outreach liaison served more than 10,000 businesses with nearly 57,000 businesses visits logged to date. There was 1,750 email project updates. And they also published the regional Southern Arizona Small Business Resource Directory. This one was is at 10 million for current funding allocation, and the proposed is also 10 million. So
Crystal wanted to check our quorum.
And I have to leave too, so.
We're at 16.
But
Okay.
if I leave,
When you leave, we'll lose the quorum.
I'm sorry, it's 1:00. I have to leave.
Bruce.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a recommendation or a motion, but I'd like to propose we change the word vitality to assistance. Dale made the point that words have meaning. Vitality speaks in my business, in economic and community development, to increased economic development activity. This is really about business assistance. And speaking honestly to the voters, I think it would be better said if it said assistance. So I would just either make a motion to that effect or recommend it.
If you make the motion, I'll second it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we should definitely take that up at our next meeting. Think about whether there's another word than assistance that you might want in there. And we also have the question of whether we want to pull it apart or not. And another word rather than vitality, like, or than assistance, could be mitigation or, some other word. But I think it's a great suggestion, and we will take it up next time. Do you have any other? Okay. Our quorum walked out the door. We are.
No, I'm quorum, I'm leaving.
Bye. Very good. We will see you all at our next meeting in 2 weeks, and appreciate your inputs today. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Joanna.